What if I told you that a document stored at United Nations headquarters in New York, one of the defining symbols of modern civilization, was written 2,000 years before the French Revolution? That the man who created it ruled over 1/3 of the entire population of the earth. He conquered Babylon and left every temple standing. He freed the slaves. He allowed every people to worship their own gods. And the only non-Jewish figure in the entire Old Testament to be called the Anointed of God was him. His name was Cyrus the Great, and the place he built as the center of his paradise on earth, Pasargadae, still holds 5 mysteries that mainstream scholarship has never been able to explain. Welcome to the first capital of the first multicultural empire in human history. Before we begin, if you find these topics fascinating, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It takes 2 seconds and genuinely helps us make more videos like this one. And at the end, write in the comments which of the 5 mysteries surprised you the most. When most of us hear the word Persia, we picture what Hollywood gave us: cruel kings behind golden masks, endless armies, a dark empire of tyranny against the enlightened West, 300 Spartans against 1,000,000 faceless soldiers. But that image is one of the greatest historical distortions ever written, and it was written by the winners. The Greeks who described Persians as barbarians kept slaves themselves. The Persians were the first civilization in recorded history to abolish it. The Greeks who described Persians as barbarians kept slaves themselves. The Persians abolished slavery first. The Greeks denied women any role in public life. Persian administrative records, thousands of which survive on clay tablets in museums today, show women receiving equal pay for equal work. That is not a beautiful legend. That is a payroll archive. The real Persian Empire of the Achaemenids was something the world had never seen before. It stretched from modern Egypt in the west to the borders of India in the east. 127 nations, hundreds of languages, dozens of religions, and all of them existed legally, officially, under the protection of the state. Not merely tolerated, protected by law. The empire demanded only taxes and acknowledgement of the king's supreme authority. In return, it guaranteed the cultural survival of every people within it, their language, their temples, their laws, their identity. The Persians built the world's first postal system, the Pasargadae. Riders changed horses at dedicated stations, covering vast distances in days. They built the Royal Road, stretching more than 2,000 kilometers, paved with stone, equipped with inns every 20 to 30 kilometers. They created the first standardized system of weights and measures across an entire civilization. Everything we today call statecraft, the Persians were engineering it when most of the world was still learning agriculture. And all of it started here, in the valley of the Pulvar River on the Iranian plateau, 2,000 meters above sea level. A place UNESCO has protected as a World Heritage Site since 2004. A place very few people know, but everyone should. In 559 BC, in a small region called Anshan in southwestern Iran, the chief of a single Persian tribe began uniting the scattered clans. His name was Cyrus. Later, Cyrus II. Later still, the Great. That title was not given to him by his own people. It was given to him by the Greeks, those same Greeks who considered Persians to be barbarians. Even his enemies were forced to acknowledge his greatness. Xenophon wrote an entire book about him, a philosophical study of ideal leadership using Cyrus as its model. Alexander the Great carried that book on his campaigns. For the ancient world, Cyrus was not an enemy. He was a standard. In 30 years, he did not merely conquer, he reinvented the idea of power itself. Before Cyrus, conquest meant one thing: burn the temples, enslave the people, install your gods, appoint your governors. The Assyrians had turned this into a system. Deportation of entire populations was their state policy. Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem and marched its people into captivity. Cyrus offered a fundamentally different model. You pay taxes and acknowledge the king's authority, and in return, you receive protection, the right to keep your language, your gods, your customs. This was a political contract, not simply the generosity of a conqueror. When his army entered Babylon in 539 BC, without a battle, without a siege, he did something no conqueror before him had ever done. He bowed before the Babylonian god Marduk. He declared himself the legitimate king chosen by Babylon's own gods, not a foreign invader imposing his own religion. He returned the divine statues that previous rulers had looted from conquered cities across the empire. And he freed every slave, regardless of their origin or nationality. The Jews whom Nebuchadnezzar had held captive in Babylon for decades, Cyrus did not merely free them. He provided state funds to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. That is why in the book of Isaiah, he is the only non-Jewish figure in all of Scripture called Mashiach, the Anointed One, chosen by God. A foreign king, given the highest title in the Jewish religious tradition by the prophets themselves. These principles, freedom of conscience, respect for local traditions, abolition of slavery, equality before the law, were recorded on the Cyrus cylinder, a clay artifact covered in cuneiform text discovered in Babylon in the 19th century, today housed in the British Museum. The United Nations recognized it as the world's first document of human rights. A copy stands in the UN headquarters in New York. 2,000 years before the Declaration of the Rights of Man, one king had already written all of this down and lived by it. But where did he build his own paradise, his first capital? The answer is Pasargadae. In 546 BC, Cyrus begins building his capital city. And the very principle of its construction is revolutionary. Nobody before him had ever built this way. Pasargadae was built simultaneously by craftsmen from every corner of the empire. Iranian builders laid the foundations. Babylonian architects designed the palace halls. Assyrian sculptors carved the reliefs. Greek craftsmen from conquered Lydia decorated the columns in the Ionic style. Egyptian artists painted the frescoes. This was the first architectural synthesis of civilizations in history. Not the eclectic spoils of a conqueror, but a deliberate project, a new visual language that could speak to every people at once. An Egyptian walking through this city would recognize familiar motifs on the walls. A Greek would see his own columns. A Babylonian would find the winged creatures he had always known. Nobody felt conquered. Everyone felt acknowledged. Every visitor to this city received the silent message, "You belong here." This was architectural policy expressed in stone. And it worked. The complex included two palaces, the audience hall and the residential palace. Between them, a garden unlike anything built before. The Chahar Bagh, meaning four gardens, a square space divided by stone-lined water channels into four symmetrical sections, filled with trees and water. The first formal garden in architectural history whose layout is documented in stone. We will come back to that garden at the end, because its legacy lives in a word you use every single day without knowing where it came from. On a hill above the palaces, a citadel called Tali Takht was rising, the administrative and defensive center of the capital. Nearby, a massive stone platform was being prepared for an even grander palace. But Cyrus never finished it. In 530 BC, he died on campaign in the east. Pasargadae was left unfinished. His son Cambyses focused on conquering Egypt. A new capital, Persepolis, was later built by Darius 100 kilometers away. Pasargadae became a sacred place, a monument to the first king. And this is where the mysteries begin. Herodotus writes that Cyrus led an expedition against the nomadic Pasargadae tribe on the eastern shores of the Caspian Sea. He died in battle. The queen Tomyris, according to legend, cut off his head and plunged it into a vessel of blood, saying, "You always thirsted for blood. Now drink your fill." But here is the problem. If his head was cut off and left in the desert, how did the body of Cyrus end up in his tomb at Pasargadae? Alexander the Great visited the tomb 200 years later and left eyewitness testimony. The sarcophagus with the body was in place, gold ornaments and weapons laid upon it. The body was there. The tomb was occupied. Not legend, an eyewitness account from one of history's best documented figures. Explanations diverge. Some historians argue that Herodotus simply got the details wrong. Others suggest Persian custom required returning a king's body home at any cost, even a covert operation deep in enemy territory. A third theory: Cyrus may have survived that battle, but died shortly afterward in secret, and an official narrative of heroic death was politically necessary for a stable transfer of power to his son Cambyses. We do not know the truth. We will probably never know. But the tomb stands, and that is its own mystery. The tomb of Cyrus is one of the strangest structures in the ancient world. Not because of its size, it is relatively modest. Not because of its decoration, there is almost none. But because it is still standing after 2,500 years in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. 6 massive steps of limestone blocks, each one smaller than the one below, topped by a rectangular stone chamber with a gabled roof resembling a Greek design. The total height is around 11 meters. Each individual block weighs several tons. They are laid without a single gram of mortar and connected by iron dovetail clamps, the same principle used in modern earthquake-resistant construction. The clamps allow blocks to move fractionally during a seismic event, absorbing the energy without fracturing the structure. This is not an accidental choice. This is a conscious engineering decision made by someone who lived in earthquake country and intended to build something that would last forever. Alexander the Great, standing here in 330 BC, was not struck by luxury. He was struck by humility. According to his contemporaries, an inscription on the tomb wall read, "Traveler, I am Cyrus, son of Cambyses, who gave the Persians their empire and ruled over Asia. Do not begrudge me this tomb." 7 words that contain more dignity than most monuments 10 times the size. Alexander ordered the tomb restored and posted a permanent guard. The man who conquered the entire known world bowed his head before the man who had done it first. But perhaps the tomb at Pasargadae is only a cenotaph, a memorial containing nothing. Perhaps the real burial place is somewhere else entirely. 70 kilometers from Pasargadae lies the necropolis of Naksh-i-Rostam, the burial site of the later Achaemenid kings, Darius, Xerxes, Artaxerxes. Their tombs are cut directly into vertical cliff faces, enormous cross-shaped facades in a sheer rock wall, like doors carved into a mountain. Standing near those cliff tombs is a bizarre structure researchers have named the Kaaba-ye Zardosht, the Cube of Zoroaster. A square stone tower with extraordinarily thick walls, almost no windows, and the few that exist appear to be decorative, false openings with no depth behind them. The only entrance is high on the exterior wall, reached by a staircase. The interior chamber has no floor. No official excavation has ever been conducted inside it. Proposed functions include a Zoroastrian fire temple, a royal archive, or, the most intriguing hypothesis, the actual burial place of Cyrus himself. The structural similarity with the Pasargadae tomb exists, but no one has dug. What is inside remains unknown. Mystery number 2, unanswered. In the audience hall of Cyrus, a single large relief survived almost intact. It stands on the door jamb of the main entrance and reaches 3 meters in height. A human figure, but not quite human. 4 wings, 2 pointing upward, 2 hanging down. On its head, the double crown of Egyptian pharaohs, the cent, symbolizing the union of Upper and Lower Egypt. Its clothing is Elamite, characteristic of the people east of Babylon. Its wings are Assyrian in style. 3 main theories about who this is. First, Cyrus himself, depicted as a godlike ruler who embodied every civilization he absorbed, a symbolic portrait without a name. Second, a protective deity, the Fravashi, a guardian angel in Zoroastrian tradition that watches over a royal threshold. Third, a deliberately anonymous image of the ideal ruler, made without a specific face, so that every people passing through that door would see their own. None of these individual elements, the Egyptian crown, the Elamite garment, the Assyrian wings, appear together anywhere else in all of ancient art. Not once. This is not borrowing. This is the invention of a new symbolic language. Mystery number 3, unanswered. Scattered across the ruined palace walls are fragments of ceremonial procession reliefs. The figures have human bodies and human faces, but instead of legs, some have fish tails. Others have bird talons with sharp claws. Others have the hooves of bulls. The official explanation is priests wearing ritual animal costumes, a tradition that exists in Babylonian and Assyrian art. But in those traditions, the boundary between person and costume is always visible. The mask is clearly a mask. In the Pasargadae reliefs, there is no such boundary. The talons and tails grow from the bodies organically, as though they are the actual body. No researcher has yet offered a convincing explanation. These images appear nowhere else in Persian art. Not at Persepolis, not at Susa, not at Ecbatana. Only here, only once in history. Mystery number 4. Among the ruins of Pasargadae, there is a place that makes a particular impression. Not because of what is there, because of what is not. The Takhte Madare Suleiman, the throne of the Mother of Solomon, is a massive rectangular platform of precisely fitted limestone blocks, approximately 400 by 300 meters. The lower courses of masonry are flawless. Every block fitted to within a millimeter, no mortar, iron butterfly clamps in precisely cut slots. The craftsmanship is absolute. But the upper course is cut off. Blocks laid but unfinished, some standing out of position. Work stopped in a single day and never resumed. Pasargadae was not destroyed by enemies. No war, no fire, no catastrophe. One morning, the workers simply left and did not come back. 25 centuries, an unfinished row of stone, like a sentence broken off mid-word. And at the highest point of the complex stand the ruins of the Zindane Suleiman, the prison of Solomon. Another Arabic name, another medieval protection strategy. But what it actually is, nobody knows. Walls too thick for an ordinary building, too few windows resembling arrow slits more than ventilation. The only entrance at the top reached by an exterior staircase. The interior chamber has no flooring. Fire temple, royal treasury, signal tower. Not one of these theories has sufficient evidence. The 5th mystery of Pasargadae, and it is as open today as all the others. And finally, the legacy of Pasargadae that lives inside a word you use every single day. The central garden was built on the Chahar Bagh principle, 4 gardens. a square space crossed by two water channels, dividing it into 4 equal sections of trees, flowers, and shade. The first formal garden in history where geometric form is part of the artistic intention. The water ran through a calculated system of gradients. The trees were planted to a strict geometric plan. Not a natural corner brought inside walls. Architecture working with living material. A design so perfect it survived 2,500 years without fundamental change. The Persians called this kind of enclosed garden Paradesa, from peri, meaning around, and desa, meaning wall. An enclosed space, a protected world, a place where water runs in the hot desert, where the shade of a tree is a luxury. The Greeks borrowed this word as Paradisos and used it specifically for the gardens of Cyrus, as something so beautiful it was difficult to express in ordinary language. It passed into Hebrew, then into Latin, Paradisus. Christian theologians used it to describe the Garden of Eden, and it became the word we all know, paradise. That single word is about one Persian garden that is 2,500 years old. Every time someone speaks of paradise, of a place of happiness, peace, and perfection, they are unknowingly quoting the geometric layout of a stone garden in the Iranian desert. It may be the most durable word in human language, one that has kept its original architectural meaning across every translation and every century. When the Taj Mahal was built in the 17th century with a Chahar Bagh garden, it was a direct tribute to the Pasargadae tradition. The gardens of the Alhambra in Granada carry the same principle through Moorish Spain. The formal parks of Versailles echo the same geometry. The Persian model of paradise spread across the Islamic world and into Europe. We still live in spaces that unconsciously repeat the idea of the first Persian paradise on Earth. Pasargadae today is an empty valley where the wind moves between stones. No fences, no crowds. You can walk up to the tomb of Cyrus and touch the same limestone that Alexander the Great touched. Very few places on Earth offer that kind of unmediated contact with the past. Only stone, sky, and wind. The first multicultural capital. The first free peoples. The first model of paradise. A place left unfinished, but never truly lost. 5 mysteries without answers, and 25 centuries of silence around them. A king's body that came home from nowhere. A tower with no known purpose. A winged figure with no name. Creatures with fishtails that appear nowhere else in history. And a row of stones laid but never finished 25 centuries ago. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not what is hidden in the walls, but why we still have not learned to live by the principles Cyrus proclaimed 2,500 years ago. Respect for other people's gods, freedom for every people to remain themselves, the abolition of slavery, equality before the law regardless of origin. The document recording all of this sits in the United Nations, and those principles remain an unreached ideal for most of the world. Pasargadae stands quietly in its valley and waits. Which of these 5 mysteries surprised you the most? Write it in the comments. It genuinely matters to us and shapes what we make next. And if you want stories like this every single day, follow our Telegram channel. The link is in the description below this video. Every day we publish posts about the mysteries of our planet, concise, fascinating, and straight to the point. See you in the next episode. We are going somewhere that is 3,000 years older than Pasargadae, and the mystery waiting there makes even these 5 look straightforward.